Both engines exploded at 35,000 feet. The pilot said they were going to die. Everyone screamed. Everyone gave up. But the quiet woman in row 8 closed her book, stood up, and walked to the cockpit. She was just a passenger. Until the Black Hawks heard her voice, and called her commander. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. It was a Monday. June 9, 2008. Houston, Texas. 3:38 in the afternoon. The heat outside was like a wall. It pressed hard against the terminal windows, as if it was trying to break in. The ground outside was so hot that the air above it was moving, those wavy lines you see on hot roads in summer. Everything far away looked like it was melting. Inside George Bush International Airport, the air conditioning was running at full power. People stood close to the cold air vents. Nobody wanted to go back outside. To the west, dark clouds were building up. The kind Houston gets in June, heavy, fast, and gone in 20 minutes. Gate E26 was packed. Continental Airlines Flight 1847 to Denver was calling its last passengers to board. The gate worker spoke into the PA system. Around her, people picked up their bags, folded their papers, finished their coffee. A Boeing 767 sat just past the gate door, wide and white, waiting to carry 216 people from the Texas heat to the cool air of Colorado. This was a well-known route. Oil company workers flew it often. Ski trips in winter. Family camping trips in summer. College kids going back to Boulder. It was normal. Nothing special. The kind of flight people take without thinking twice. Among the last people to board was a woman almost nobody noticed. She was tall, close to 6 feet. Late 40s, maybe. Wide shoulders. Strong arms, the kind you get from real work, not from a gym. Her skin was dark from years in the sun. There were faint lines on her face. Small scars too, if you looked closely. Her face was hard to place, dark eyebrows, deep brown eyes, a strong nose, sharp cheekbones. Maybe from the Mediterranean. Maybe Middle Eastern. Or a mix of many things that was hard to name. Her hair was cut short, gray running through the dark. No style to it at all. Just easy and fast. Her clothes matched, faded khaki cargo pants with worn spots on the knees, an olive green t-shirt so old the color had faded to almost gray, and a light tactical vest worn over the shirt, the kind with many pockets and loops sewn into the fabric. Not the kind a tourist wears. The loops were for tools, not cameras. On her feet were dusty hiking boots that had clearly walked a very long way. She carried an old military bag and a small black backpack. She walked through the boarding line without wasting a single step. She found her seat, 8D, aisle seat on the left side of the plane, and sat down like someone who had sat in far worse places many times before. She pulled a worn paperback from her bag. Tom Clancy's Clear and Present Danger. She put on a pair of reading glasses, settled them on her nose, and opened to her page. She did not look at anyone. She did not smile at the flight workers. She did not need help putting her bag away. She simply sat down, opened her book, and became invisible. The people around her gave her space without knowing why. Something about the way she sat, not mean, not rude, just completely closed off, sent a clear message: do not talk to this person. And nobody did. You were in seat 8E. The middle seat. You had been dreading it since you checked in. 3 hours stuck in the middle, between strangers, no armrest to call your own. You sat down, glanced at the woman in 8D, tall, older, looks like she works outdoors, probably won't bother me, and then you looked at your phone and forgot about her completely. You had no idea who she really was. Her name was Nadia Volov. She was 48 years old. The passport she carried today said Nicole Vaughn. That was not her real name. Her real name, and who she really was, were kept secret at levels that most government workers never even knew existed. Nadia Volov was a lieutenant colonel in United States Army Special Operations. She belonged to a unit so secret it had no public name. Inside the spy world, people called it the Activity, short for its real name, the Intelligence Support Activity, or ISA. It was a top-level special operations unit that worked completely in the dark. Its members did high-risk spy work. They ran direct attack missions. They went to places the government could never officially say they had been. Their work never showed up in newspapers. It never would. Inside this already top-level unit, Nadia had one main skill: flying military helicopters in dangerous places. She was both a pilot and a mission leader. For 23 years, she had done things with military helicopters that most people could not even picture. She had flown special operations teams into enemy areas in the middle of the night. She had pulled out high-value targets while bullets were flying. She had flown spy missions over airspace controlled by enemy countries. She had taken Black Hawks and Little Birds into places where no helicopter should have been able to go, and she had brought her crews back out alive every time. Her call sign was Commander. Not just because of her rank, though her rank was high. She had earned that name because of what she did when missions fell apart. When helicopters were being shot at and teams were stuck and everything was going wrong, Nadia was the one who took over. She made the hard calls. She found the way home when there was no clear way home. Other special operations helicopter pilots, men who had flown hundreds of combat missions, men who had seen things that stay with you forever, all said the same thing about her: when everything goes to hell, you want Commander on the radio. She had flown more than 200 combat missions. Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, and secret places on 3 different parts of the world that she was not allowed to name. She had been shot down twice, once in Afghanistan, once somewhere she could never say. Both times, she had lived through the crash. Both times, she had led her crew to safety on foot through enemy land, moving at night, using the dark and the ground the way she had been trained. Flying had been part of her life since she was a child. Her father had been a Soviet military helicopter pilot, one of the best in the Russian Air Force. In 1985, when Nadia was just 15 years old, he made a decision that changed everything. He flew his helicopter across the border and gave himself up to American forces, bringing his teenage daughter with him. He left behind his career, his country, and his whole old life. He and Nadia started over in America. Growing up, Nadia had been around military aircraft, around the people who flew them, and around the idea that a helicopter was not just a machine, it was a way of solving problems that had no other answer. When she was old enough, she joined the army. Everything else followed naturally from there. She was one of only 7 women who had ever made it into this unit. She had broken through walls in a world that had not wanted her there, not by asking for credit, not by giving speeches, but simply by being better than almost everyone else. The Navy SEALs she flew trusted her with their lives. The Delta Force soldiers trusted her. The armed CIA agents who did not officially exist trusted her. She had earned that trust the only way it can truly be earned, by showing up, doing the job, and bringing people home. 3 weeks before this flight, she had finished what her commander called the most dangerous helicopter mission in the unit's history. She had flown a team into an enemy country to bring back secret materials. She had done it at night, flying so low that the helicopter was nearly touching the ground, using the hills and valleys to stay hidden from enemy radar. She had avoided surface-to-air missiles. She had gotten her team in and gotten them out safely. After the mission, her commander had looked at her and said something she had not expected. "You need to go." Not a suggestion, an order. "You have been on active duty for 18 months with no real break. Your thinking is still sharp but your body is slowing down. I can see it. Take 2 weeks. Go somewhere with no phone signal. Come back rested." That is a direct order. So here she was. Seat 8D. Houston to Denver. Tom Clancy. Reading glasses. 2 weeks of walking alone in the Rocky Mountains, where nobody knew her name, where there was no phone signal, where she could try, just for a little while, to be Nicole Vaughn, the normal person instead of Lieutenant Colonel Volkov, call sign Commander. She turned a page of her book and did not look up. The plane moved away from the gate at 4:01 p.m. It rolled out, waited in line, and lifted off into the hot Texas sky at 4:19 p.m. The flight workers moved through the cabin with drinks. The seatbelt sign turned off. People leaned back in their seats, opened laptops, put on headphones. Nadia read her book. Outside, the Texas land stretched below, brown fields and green patches, farm roads cutting across it in straight lines, small groups of buildings here and there that meant a town. The plane climbed through thin clouds and leveled off at 35,000 feet, heading northwest toward Colorado. Everything was normal. Everything was fine. For exactly 1 hour and 9 minutes. 4:47 p.m. 35,000 feet above the Texas Panhandle. About 520 miles west of Houston. Nadia was deep into Chapter 12. The cabin was quiet the way planes go quiet when flying steady, the low hum of engines, the soft sound of moving air, the odd cough or murmur. People were sleeping. People were watching movies on small screens. You had fallen asleep in 8E, your head leaning to one side. Then the world broke apart. The sound was like nothing most passengers had ever heard. Not the small pop of a tire or the bang of a bag falling. It was a huge, deep blast, not one explosion but two, almost at the same time, half a second apart. The plane shook so hard that heads snapped forward. Bags fell from the bins above. Drinks flew. A child in the back of the plane screamed. Through the right side windows, passengers could see orange fire growing from the engine, then thick black smoke, heavy, oily, very wrong. Through the left windows, the same thing. Both engines. Both at once. What had happened, what the engineers and accident workers would spend months figuring out, was this, a bad part. Both engines on this plane had engine fan blades from the same bad production batch. The same faulty metal. A problem that should have been caught during quality checks but was not. At this height, at this temperature, after this many hours of flying, the weak spot in both engines broke at almost exactly the same moment. The blades broke apart. The engines tore themselves to pieces. Both engines blew up from the inside out. Hot metal pieces punched through the engine covers. Fuel lines broke open. And, this was what made everything far worse, pieces of metal from the blasts tore through the pressure tubes and control wires that ran through the base of the wings. The pressure system that made the flight controls move when the pilots used them began losing power right away. In 15 seconds, Continental Airlines Flight 1847 had gone from a fully working plane to a broken glider with failing controls and no engines at all. Not one engine limping along. Both gone. In the front of the plane, Captain Robert Hayes held the controls and stared at an instrument panel showing him things he had never trained for, not really. You train for one engine failing. You do not train for both engines blowing up at the same time and taking the pressure system with them. Hayes had 18,000 flying hours. 24 years with Continental. He was 51, a father of 5, a man who had dealt with problems before. But not this. Mayday, 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 Continental 1847, Houston Center, both engines failed, both engines destroyed, emergency declared, 35,000 feet over the Panhandle. First Officer Angela Torres worked through the emergency steps quickly and calmly, her hands moving fast, her voice steady. Torres was 37. She had 8,900 flying hours. Before Continental, she had been a helicopter pilot for the Coast Guard. She knew how to handle emergencies. She knew that staying calm was a tool. But the emergency steps were not made for this. There was no step 4, both engines completely destroyed plus pressure system failure. The restart steps were useless, there was nothing to restart. The engines were gone. The pressure gauges were falling fast. Hayes did the math that every pilot fears. At 35,000 feet, a Boeing 767 can glide, with no engines at all, about 120 miles before it runs out of height and hits the ground. 120 miles. He looked at the map screen. The nearest airport big enough to land on was Amarillo, Texas. Amarillo was 140 miles away. They were 20 miles short. There was no airport they could reach. And with every passing second, the pressure dropped and the controls got heavier and harder to move. Hayes picked up the PA microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Hayes." He had made his voice steady. It took everything he had. "Both engines have failed completely. We have no power. We are gliding. Our flight controls are getting worse because of damage to the pressure system. We cannot reach an airport. We are going to have to try to land on open ground." A pause. Just one breath. "This is extremely serious. Flight workers, get ready for an emergency landing. Everyone, get into the brace position. I am sorry. This is the worst possible situation. I do not know if we can survive this. I am going to do my best, but I need everyone to get ready for a crash landing." The cabin exploded in noise. Not literally, not yet. But the sound of 216 people who had just heard their pilot say he did not know if they would live was a sound that should never exist inside a plane. People screamed. People cried. People grabbed their phones and called anyone they could, saying the words they had always meant to say. Mothers pulled children close. Strangers grabbed each other's hands. The flight workers tried to shout the brace position instructions over the noise, but the noise was winning. In seat 8D, Nadia Volov closed her Tom Clancy novel. She set it carefully on the seat tray. She took off her reading glasses, folded them, and put them in her vest pocket. Around her, people were crying and praying and calling loved ones. You had been jolted awake and now sat frozen with fear, gripping the armrests with white knuckles. Nadia looked at the situation for exactly 5 seconds. Both engines gone. Pressure system damaged. 120-mile glide range. Nearest airport 140 miles away. No restart possible. Controls getting worse every minute. We are going to hit the ground. Her mind had been doing this for 23 years. Reading danger the way other people read normal information. Cutting through the fear and the noise and finding the clear picture underneath. She unbuckled her seatbelt. Lead flight worker Patricia Wells was in the front of the plane, trying to reach her crew in the back, trying to remember the exact words for the emergency announcement, trying not to cry. Patricia was 46 years old. She had been flying with Continental for 21 years. She had practiced emergencies hundreds of times in training. She had thought, sometimes, in the back of her mind, that she was ready. She was not ready for this. She heard footsteps and turned. A tall woman in cargo pants and a tactical vest was walking toward her from the cabin, moving calmly through a crowd of screaming, crying passengers as if the cabin were empty. The woman was not crying. She was not white with fear. She looked, Patricia would later tell investigators, like someone walking into work. "My name is Lieutenant Colonel Nadia Volov," the woman said. Her voice was quiet. But it cut through the noise the way a voice that is used to being heard cuts through anything. "I am with U.S. Army Special Operations Aviation. I am a helicopter pilot and mission leader. I have been flying for 23 years, most of it in combat." Patricia stared. "Your pilots need help," Nadia went on. "I cannot fly this plane, I have never sat in a commercial cockpit. But I understand flying emergencies. I know how to manage dangerous situations. I know how to land damaged aircraft. Let me help them." "The captain said," Patricia began. "I know what the captain said. He said it is hopeless. He is not wrong about how bad the situation is. He may be wrong about the ending. Nadia's brown eyes were completely still. Doing nothing means everyone dies for certain. Let me try. I have gotten people home from situations that looked worse than this. My call sign is Commander. That is what I do, I take over when everything is falling apart. Let me talk to your pilots. Patricia Wells made the decision she would spend the rest of her life not regretting. She reached for the cockpit door. She knocked. She called out her name. And she unlocked the door. When Nadia walked into the cockpit, Captain Hayes turned and saw a woman in cargo pants and a tactical vest. For 1/2 second his face said everything. Who are you and why are you in my cockpit? Nadia spoke before he could. Her eyes were already moving across the instrument panel, reading it the way pilots read panels, fast and thorough. Lieutenant Colonel Nadia Volov, Army Special Operations Aviation, call sign Commander. 23 years flying military helicopters in combat. I cannot fly a 767 but I understand emergencies. What is your situation right now? Hayes stared for 1 second. Then he answered, because he was desperate, and desperate people take help from wherever it comes. Both engines are completely destroyed. No power at all. The pressure system is failing, we are losing control of the plane every minute. The nearest airport is 140 miles away. We can only glide 120 miles. We cannot reach it. We are going to hit ground out in the panhandle. I have been trying to. Stop, Nadia said. Not unkindly. You are thinking like a commercial pilot trying to reach a runway. Hayes blinked. Think like a military pilot. Forget airports. Look at what you actually have. She pointed out the cockpit windows. Below, the Texas panhandle spread in every direction, flat, brown, wide open. Grassland. Farm roads cutting straight lines across it. Wide open spaces with no trees, no buildings, no big things in the way. You do not need a runway. You need flat ground. That is not, Hayes began. What is your best glide speed? About 220 knots, but. Good. You have height. You have speed. You have flat ground with almost nothing in the way. You have daylight. She studied the ground below, looking for what she knew how to find, long flat stretches, clear of big obstacles. In special operations we land helicopters in worse places than this every week. The idea is the same, you are not trying to land. You are trying to crash in a controlled way. You pick your spot. You set up for the lowest possible speed on impact. You keep the wings level. You keep the nose slightly up. You protect the main body of the plane. We are a commercial airliner, not a Black Hawk. I know what you are. The laws of physics do not care. Flat surface. Lowest possible speed. Wings level. Nose slightly up. That is how you survive a forced landing with no engines, no matter what kind of aircraft you are in. She turned to Torres. First Officer Torres, Coast Guard background. Torres was looking at her with an expression that had shifted from fear to something harder to name. That is right. Then you understand what I am saying. Forced landings. Controlled crashes. You have been trained for this. Yes, Torres said quietly. I have heard SEALs talk about Commander, Torres said. Her voice was steadier now. The pilot from the activity who got shot down in Afghanistan and still finished the mission. That is you. Same person. Different day. Nadia looked at Hayes. Captain, I am not here to take your plane from you. This is your aircraft. These are your people. But I can be your second pair of eyes. I can give you a military pilot's way of looking at this ground. I have done forced landings. I have put aircraft into bad ground and walked away and brought my crew home. Let me help you. We have maybe 15 minutes. Let us use them. Robert Hayes had built his whole career on being the best person in the cockpit. He was the kind of pilot who prepared for every possible problem, who knew all his steps, who trusted his training. And his training said, this was not survivable. But the woman standing behind him, this solid, quiet, completely calm woman in cargo pants, was telling him there was another way to look at it. All right, he said. What do you see? They had 19 minutes. Nadia stood behind the pilots, she did not touch the controls, she would not touch the controls, and she talked. She pointed. She studied. She took 23 years of combat flying and turned it into words two commercial pilots could use. The pressure loss, how much control do you still have? Maybe 60% on the wing controls, Torres said. The up and down control is getting slow. We are using the tail rudder to help. Good. The tail rudder is cable-driven, mechanical, yes. Not run by pressure. Yes. Then you have full rudder control no matter what happens to the pressure. Use that. The destroyed engines are not fully dead, the fan blades are still spinning in the air moving past them. They create uneven drag. You can use that drag to help turn the plane. Small movements of the throttle controls, even though there is nothing left to throttle, will change the angle of the spinning blades and give you a little extra turning ability. Hayes' eyes went wide. I have never. Neither have I, in a 767. But I have done the same thing in helicopters with partly broken rotors. The idea holds. Try it. Hayes put his hand on the left throttle. Pushed it slightly forward. The spinning left engine changed its angle, almost too small to feel. But the plane responded, a small roll to the right, better than the failing pressure controls had been giving him. It is working, Torres said quietly. Good. Keep that. You will need it in the final approach when the pressure is nearly all gone. Nadia turned to the windows and studied the ground below with eyes that had chosen landing spots in the dark, under fire, in mountains and deserts, in places with no name. I need you to look for a long flat stretch, at least 2 miles, more if possible. Flat. No big structures. No power lines if we can avoid them. Farm roads are okay to hit, the wheels will hit them but the main body of the plane will skip over. There, Torres said, pointing. That section, maybe 40 miles ahead. Looks flat. Looks like open grazing land. Nadia looked. I see it. Captain, turn 15 degrees left, use the rudder, help it with spinning drag from the right engine. Let us angle toward that area. What is our height? 28,000 feet, Hayes said. How fast are we dropping? About 1,800 feet per minute. Nadia did the quick math she had been doing in her head for 2 decades, the math of staying alive. We have roughly 15 minutes of flying left. We will reach that area if we hold this direction. Start setting up for landing. Putting the gear down will cost us glide distance. I know. But the gear down slows your approach speed, and the gear takes the first hit on landing. It will break apart on open ground, that cannot be avoided, but a broken gear uses up energy that would otherwise go into the main body of the plane. You want the gear down before impact. Put it down at 5,000 feet. Hayes nodded. He was flying now. Not panicking. Flying. And then a voice came over the radio. Continental 1847, this is Hammer 1, 2 UH-60 Black Hawks, 149th Aviation, Texas Army National Guard. We were on training runs 90 miles south of you. We turned toward your emergency. We are listening to your frequency. A pause. Then. Whoever is giving tactical guidance on that aircraft, you are using special operations flying language. Identify yourself for rescue guidance. Nadia reached past Torres and pressed the radio button. Hammer 1, this is Lieutenant Colonel Nadia Volov. I am currently a passenger on Continental 1847, helping the cockpit crew. Call sign Commander, formerly with the activity. I am guiding a controlled crash landing into open panhandle ground. We will hit ground in about 11 minutes. I need you to get ground emergency teams moving and be ready to treat many wounded at the crash site. The radio went silent for exactly 4 seconds. Then, Commander. Commander Volkov from ISA. Chief Warrant Officer Mark Hammer Williams was 43 years old. He had been flying Army helicopters for 21 years. 3,200 hours of flying time. 2 tours to Iraq, 1 to Afghanistan. During those years, he had heard stories, the kind that move quietly through military flying circles, told in low voices in mission rooms and flight briefing areas. Stories about a woman who flew for the activity. Who had gone down in Afghanistan and still finished the mission. Who pilots called commander because when things went wrong, she was the one who found the way home. Holy, Continental 1847, you have the best special operations helicopter pilot in the Army guiding your emergency. Williams' voice was controlled, but he could not keep the feeling completely out of it. Commander, we are 15 minutes from your position. We will be overhead before you hit ground. Every emergency team in Texas is being called out, fire, medical, National Guard ground teams. Amarillo Hospital is on standby. A second group of helicopters is coming from the National Guard base. A short pause. Then. Ma'am, it is an honor. Bring them home, Commander. Show these people what special operators do. In the cabin, the panic had not stopped. People were still crying. Still on their phones saying goodbye. The flight workers were moving through the rows, making sure seatbelts were tight, pushing tray tables up, talking people through the brace position. Some passengers listened. Some were too far gone with fear to hear anything. But in the cockpit, 3 people were working. Height? Nadia asked. 16,000 feet. Time until we hit ground? 8 minutes, maybe 9, Torres said. Begin your final approach. We want to be 1,000 feet above ground 1 minute before impact. The final approach angle should be shallow, about 3 degrees. You are not diving at the ground. You are sliding toward it. Pressure system is almost completely gone, Hayes said. His voice was tight but steady. Side control is very slow. Use the spinning engine drag. The method we tried earlier. Right. I have it. Set for 160 knots approach speed. We want to hit the ground as slow as possible while still being able to steer. Wing flaps. Flap controls are partly damaged, I have partial flap out. Maybe 15 degrees. Better than 0. Use what you have. At 5,000 feet, gear down. Tell the cabin, people need to know impact is close. Flight workers should have everyone in brace position by then. Hayes picked up the PA. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Hayes. We will hit the ground in about 6 minutes. We are going to try to land on flat open land. Please get into the brace position now, bend forward, hands on the seat in front of you, head down. Keep your seatbelts tight. Do not remove them. Flight workers, prepare for impact. In the cabin, the crying got louder for a moment, and then, strangely, began to quiet down. Not because the fear went away. Because there was nothing left to do except what the captain had said. People bent forward. People held each other's hands. People whispered prayers and names into the air of the cabin, and then they went still. 5,000 feet, Torres said. Gear down, Nadia said. Hayes reached for the landing gear handle. 4:58 p.m. From 1,000 feet above the Texas Panhandle, the flat land below looked almost peaceful. Brown grass going all the way to the horizon. A farm road cutting a straight line left to right. No buildings. No power lines. Just land. Wide and flat and quiet, waiting. Wings level, Nadia said. Her voice was low and very steady. Nose slightly up. Lowest speed you can hold. You have this, Captain. Hayes was flying on feel now. The pressure system was nearly gone. The controls were heavy and slow to respond. He was using the spinning engine drag to keep the wings level, making tiny moves with the tail rudder, holding the plane in the shallow descent Nadia had described. 160 knots. 150, he was slowing down as much as he dared. You are doing it, Torres said. You are actually doing it. 500 feet, Nadia said. Brace. She grabbed the back of Hayes' seat with both hands. She planted her feet. The ground came up. The landing gear hit first, 3 sets of wheels touching Texas grass at 140 knots. For half a second the plane bounced slightly, the way any plane does on a rough landing. Then the wheels began to sink into the soft earth and the gear began to break apart, and the plane settled, and the nose came down, and the belly of the 767 met the ground. The sound was like nothing most of them had ever heard. Not a bang, more of a long grinding, tearing, crushing roar that seemed to last forever but lasted 7 seconds. The plane slid. Grass flew up against the windows and turned them green. The right wing tip dug into the earth and the plane turned slightly right, then straightened, the tail swinging before it settled. The nose gear broke and the nose dropped, cutting a long line in the dirt. Overhead bins burst open. People who had not braced properly were thrown forward. Fire came from the left engine, what was left of it, and black smoke poured into the sky. And then the plane stopped. 2,400 feet of torn earth and flat grass marked where it had been. For 1 second, just one, there was total silence inside the cabin. Then noise. Crying, coughing, people calling out names. Smoke starting to come from somewhere near the back. And over all of it, one voice, Patricia Wells, lead flight worker, shouting with everything she had. Evacuate. Evacuate. Leave everything. Get out now. The emergency exit doors blew open. The slides dropped down. People moved. In the cockpit, Nadia was already moving. Hayes was slumped against his harness, awake but stunned, blood on his forehead from a cut he had not felt yet. Torres was already reaching for him, checking him, saying his name. Nadia put her hand briefly on Hayes' shoulder. You did it, she said. You got them down. Now get out. Then she was gone. Outside, the Texas Panhandle in June was not a comfortable place. The late afternoon sun still pressed down at 95 degrees. The smoke from the left engine was thick and oily and rising high into the sky, visible from 20 miles away in every direction. The plane sat at a strange angle, nose dug into the dirt, tail slightly raised, one wing lower than the other. But the main body of the plane was in one piece. That was the thing that mattered. The airframe had held together. It had done what Nadia had said it would do, slid across the flat land, taken the hit through the gear and the belly, protected the long metal tube where 216 people had been sitting. Not everyone had survived. 30 passengers, in the sections directly above where the wings met the body, where the force of the impact had been strongest, had been killed by forces that no seat or seatbelt or crash technique could have stopped. 30 people. 30 families. 30 names that would be said with grief for the rest of someone's life. But 186 had gotten out. They moved across the grass in a slow river, some walking, some limping, some being carried. There were broken arms. Broken ribs. Cuts and head injuries and people in shock sitting in the grass staring at nothing. There were children crying for parents and parents calling for children and people who had never spoken to each other now holding each other up. And there was Nadia. She had gotten out through the left front exit. Blood was running down her face from a cut on her forehead, she had hit the instrument panel housing during impact, a small injury she had not noticed until the rush of danger began to ease. She pressed her palm against the cut and forgot about it. She walked into the crowd of survivors and began to work. She moved through the field the way she had moved through crash sites before, quickly, in order, checking how badly people were hurt, using what she knew. She had no medical tools. She used what was around her, clothing torn into strips for bandages, seat cushions brought out from the plane as padding, people who were not hurt directed to carry those who were. She set up the area into sections, those who could walk, here. Serious cases, there. People in shock, along this line. She found a 7-year-old girl sitting alone in the grass with a long cut on her left arm, crying quietly. Nadia sat down in the dirt beside her and used a piece of her own t-shirt, torn from the bottom, to bandage the arm. The girl looked at her with wide eyes. "What is your name?" Nadia asked. "Emma." "Emma, I need you to press hard on this bandage and hold it. Can you do that?" Emma pressed. Nadia moved on. There was an older man sitting alone near the back of the wreckage, maybe 65, gray hair, dress shirt torn at the shoulder, one shoe missing. He was not crying. He was not calling anyone. He was just sitting in the grass with his hands in his lap, staring at nothing. Nadia crouched beside him. "Sir. Can you hear me?" He looked up slowly. Like someone coming up from deep water. "My wife," he said. "She was in seat 31C. I was in 31A. When the plane stopped, we got separated during the exit. I have looked. I cannot find her." Nadia put her hand on his arm. She did not rush him. "What is she wearing?" "Blue blouse. White pants. Gray hair, short." Nadia stood and scanned the field, moving her eyes across it the way she had scanned landing zones from the air for 23 years, row by row, section by section. There. Near the walking wounded group. Sitting up, a bandage on her left hand, talking to a National Guard medic. "She is over there," Nadia said. "Blue blouse. She is sitting up and talking. She is okay." The man got to his feet. His legs were unsteady. Nadia took his arm and walked him across the field. 20 steps. 30. And then the woman in the blue blouse looked up and saw him, and whatever the medic had been saying to her stopped mattering completely. Nadia let go of his arm and stepped back. She did not watch the reunion. There was more work to do. But she heard it, the sound two people make when they find each other after being certain they had lost each other forever. She had heard that sound before. At the end of missions that should not have had good endings. It was one of the few sounds in her experience that felt like payment for the work. 6 minutes after the plane came to rest, the sound of rotor blades came from the south. 2 UH-60 Black Hawks, flying fast and low, moving with the clear purpose of military aircraft on a mission. They circled the wreckage once, looking, confirming, and then the lead helicopter slowed and came down in a field 300 yards from the plane, its rotor wash flattening the grass in a wide circle, raising a cloud of dust. The second Black Hawk landed 100 yards further out. Doors opened. Soldiers and medics came out at a run. Chief Warrant Officer Mark Hammer Williams stepped out of the lead Black Hawk. He was a lean man, medium height, in his flight suit and helmet. He had been in crash sites before. But not like this, not a commercial plane, not this many people, not this much smoke and chaos and sound. He looked across the field and found the person he was looking for right away. Not because he knew her face, he had never met her. But because in the middle of a broken, painful, noisy scene, there was one person moving with complete certainty. One person giving directions, setting things up, making decisions without stopping. He walked toward her. She was kneeling beside a man with a clearly broken leg, keeping it still with a jacket she had found. There was blood on her face and dirt on her vest and a look of total focus that had no room in it for anything except the work right in front of her. Williams stopped. He brought his hand up in a salute. Nadia looked up briefly. "No salutes," she said. "We have wounded. What medical help do you have?" Williams lowered his hand and got to work. 2 Black Hawks with medics. Full medical kits. We can carry 10 serious patients per aircraft. Ground emergency teams are 20 minutes behind us, fire, medics, 3 ambulance groups. Amarillo Hospital is active. A second group of helicopters is on the way from the National Guard base. Good. She finished keeping the leg still and stood. Start checking injuries in the field. Serious patients first, internal injuries, heavy blood loss, trauma. People who can walk wait for the ground transport. I have them in sections over there. She pointed. Your medics start with the serious section first. Williams turned to his crew. You heard her. Move. His medics moved. He turned back to Nadia. Up close, the cut on her forehead was clearly visible, long, not going to kill her but bleeding steadily down the side of her face. She had not done anything about it. Williams fell into step beside her as she walked. Do you ever stop? He asked. Stop what? Working. Taking care of people. You are bleeding, ma'am. You have been bleeding since before we landed. I am aware. Our medic can. After the serious cases are loaded. She pointed at a young man being carried toward the helicopter on a stretcher made from seat cushions and belts. That one first. Something wrong inside, I think. He was awake when I found him but his color was bad. Get him in the air before the ground ambulances get here. Williams passed the instruction on without question. They worked side by side for another 20 minutes, the Black Hawk pilot and the Special Operations Commander, until the last serious patient was in the air and the ground teams had full control of the scene. Only then did Nadia sit down on the side step of an ambulance and let the paramedic clean the cut on her forehead and close it with small bandage strips. She sat quietly while he worked, her hands loose in her lap, her eyes on the plane in the field. You did something today I have never seen, the medic said. He was young, maybe 24. I have been at a lot of bad scenes. I have never seen anyone set up a mass injury event that fast. Not even the trained first responders. You learn it, Nadia said simply. You learn it because you have to. The medic finished and stepped back. Nadia stood. She pressed her fingers against the strips to test them. Then she turned back toward the field, toward the sound of helicopters and the steady work of getting people home. Ma'am, William said quietly. He had been watching. You just saved 186 people using methods that do not exist in commercial flying. How? Nadia tore a strip from the bottom of her shirt and pressed it against her forehead without breaking stride, already walking toward the next group. Military helicopter flying teaches you to land broken aircraft in dangerous places, she said. Today, Texas grassland was the dangerous place. Same ideas. Find the best bad choice. Do it as well as you possibly can. Accept that some losses cannot be stopped. Bring home everyone you can. She stopped for a moment and looked back at the plane, the long broken shape of it lying in the dirt, smoke still going up from the engine areas, the line it had dug across the earth, the trail of flat grass going all the way back to where the wheels had first touched down. Captain Hayes flew that plane, she said. Not me. I gave him a way to think about it. He did the flying. First Officer Torres helped him hold it together. Your helicopters got here fast. Everyone did their part. But you. I saw the situation from a different angle. That is all. She turned away from the plane and walked back into the field. That is what commanders do. We see angles other people miss because we have lived in those angles. We have been in impossible situations before. We know that impossible usually just means extremely hard. Now come on, there are people in that section who need to be loaded before the ground teams get here. Williams looked at her for one more second. Then he followed. By the time the ground emergency teams arrived, the Black Hawks had already made their first trips to Amarillo Hospital, carrying the most serious patients. By the time the second group of National Guard helicopters landed on the field, the way Nadia had set up the injured people was working well, patients moving from field to helicopter in a smooth order that the emergency leaders who arrived would later say was better than most practice drills they had ever run. First Officer Angela Torres walked off the plane on her own feet, helping Captain Hayes, who had a mild head injury and a deep cut above his right eye but was awake and talking. Patricia Wells came out last, after making sure every surviving passenger had left the plane. She had walked the entire aircraft twice, looking under seats, calling into bathrooms, checking for anyone left behind. She found Nadia at the edge of the field, sitting in the grass. Just sitting. The work was done, the serious patients were loaded, the walking wounded were being helped by the ground teams, the scene was fully in the hands of the people trained for exactly this. Nadia had found a piece of clean bandage somewhere and pressed it against the cut on her forehead. She was watching the second group of helicopters come in. Patricia sat down next to her. For a while, neither of them spoke. "Is that really your name?" Patricia finally asked. "Nadia Volov. Today it is." Patricia looked at her. "You told me your call sign was Commander. That is what you do. Take over when everything falls apart." "That is right. You did not look scared. Not once. Not from the moment you stood up from your seat." Nadia was quiet for a moment. Out in the field, a National Guard medic was treating little Emma, putting a proper bandage over the one made from Nadia's shirt. Emma was not crying anymore. "I have been scared," Nadia said. "I was scared in Afghanistan when we went down the first time. I was scared walking out in the dark not knowing if we would make it. I was scared 3 weeks ago when the missile warning systems were going off and I did not know if the defense systems would work." She paused. Being scared is not the problem. The problem is letting the fear run the decision. You learn, over time, through many situations that could have gone worse, to move the fear to one side and make the decision anyway. That is all. "That is all," Patricia said quietly. "It sounds simple. It is not. It takes years. And it costs things." Nadia looked down at her hands for a moment, then back up at the helicopters. "But when you have it, when that skill is truly inside you, it is useful. Today it was useful." The final count was this: 186 people alive. 30 dead. An 86% survival rate for a double-engine explosion at cruising height that had destroyed both engines at the same time, broken the pressure system, and left the plane with failing controls and no chance of reaching an airport. A survival rate that should have been 0. A survival rate that existed because a commercial pilot, supported by a special operations helicopter commander who happened to be in seat 8D, had flown a broken 767 onto a flat stretch of Texas grass and kept the main body of the plane in one piece. The National Transportation Safety Board would call it an event of survival that has no equal. The FAA would use it in updated emergency training. Engineers would spend 18 months studying exactly how it had been done. But those things were in the future. Right now the count was 186 people, sitting in an ambulance, lying in a field hospital, being loaded into a Black Hawk, or already on an operating table in Amarillo. People who had called home to say goodbye and had not had to. People who had held their children's hands in the dark and had gotten to keep holding them. The Department of Defense tried to keep Nadia's name quiet. They always tried. But 186 people and 2 helicopter crews all knew the same story. The name got out within 72 hours. By Friday it was in the papers. Nadia refused every interview request except one. She gave one, to a reporter from the Associated Press who had been patient without being rude. She sat across from him in a hotel meeting room in Amarillo, wearing plain clean clothes for once, a dark blue shirt, dark pants, no tactical vest, with a bandage over the healed cut on her forehead. The reporter asked how she had stayed so calm. She looked at the question for a moment, the way she looked at landing zones, finding the right angle. I have spent 23 years flying into situations where survival was not a sure thing, she said. Where the mission mattered more than safety. Where failing meant people died. You learn, after enough of those situations, how to make decisions when there are no good choices. You learn to lead when everyone around you is terrified. You learn that panic is something you cannot afford when other people's lives depend on your clear thinking. She looked at her hands briefly. Then back at the reporter. Today I was not special operations. I was a passenger who happened to have skills that matched what the situation needed. Captain Hayes flew that plane. First Officer Torres held it together beside him. The flight workers managed 216 terrified passengers. Chief Warrant Officer Williams and his crews got there fast and did exactly what was needed. Everyone did their part. But your role, the reporter started. My role was to give the cockpit crew a way of seeing the problem that they did not have. That is all. I have been in situations that looked like this one: broken plane, failing controls, no good choices, certain death if you choose wrong. I have been there before. So when I walked into that cockpit, I was not seeing it for the first time. I was seeing something I had seen before. And that familiarity is a very powerful thing. The reporter asked about the call sign. About Commander. For the first time, something shifted in her expression. Not quite a smile. Something quieter. That name came from operations, she said. Not this kind. Other kinds. Long nights in bad places. Teams counting on you. Missions that were not supposed to be possible. You build a name over time, one decision at a time, one mission at a time, one night of flying in the dark over land that wants to kill you, and bringing your people home. You build it by never giving up when giving up feels like the only choice. By finding the way when there is no clear way. She folded her hands on the table. I did not decide to be commander on that plane. I just did the job I have always done. I saw a situation falling apart. I saw that the crew needed a different way to look at it. I gave them that. I have given teams that same thing in the dark over Iraq, over Afghanistan, over places I cannot name. Same skill. Different place. The Texas Panhandle is not so different from a hostile mountain when your plane is broken and the ground is coming up. In both cases, you find the best bad choice and you carry it out as well as you possibly can. She paused. What I will not do, what I have never done in 23 years, is accept that a situation is hopeless before I have looked at every angle. People say something is impossible and they mean, I cannot see how to do it. Commanders, real commanders, the kind who earn that name, learn to see the angles that other people miss. Because we have been in those angles. We have crashed before. We have survived before. We know what survival looks like even when it looks like nothing. She stood up. The interview was over. I hope Captain Hayes and First Officer Torres get everything they deserve for what they did, she said. They flew that plane. I just showed them where to land it. She walked out of the meeting room. She had a flight to catch, a small commuter plane to Durango, Colorado, where a trail waited for her, and 2 weeks of mountains and silence and no phone signal. Her commander had ordered her to take time off. She was going to take it. But first she stopped in the hospital hallway outside, where a 7-year-old girl named Emma was sitting with her parents, a new bandage on her left arm, a cup of juice in her hand. Emma looked up and saw her. You are the lady who fixed my arm, Emma said. You are the one who kept the pressure on, Nadia said. You did the hard part. Emma thought about this carefully, the way young children think about things. Then she held up the juice cup. You want some? Nadia smiled. A real one, not the controlled, careful look she wore in cockpits and secret meeting rooms. A real smile. No thank you, she said. That is yours. You earned it. She walked down the hospital hallway and out through the glass doors into the Amarillo afternoon, the sun lower now, the heat finally backing off a little, and somewhere to the west the mountains waiting. Lieutenant Colonel Nadia Volov. Call sign, Commander. Age 48. On leave for 2 weeks. The most important passenger on Continental Airlines Flight 1847. The quiet woman in seat 8D. The National Transportation Safety Board study took 11 months. The final report was 847 pages long. Pages 1 through 200 covered what had broken, the bad part in the engine fan blades, the quality check failures that had let blades from the same bad batch go into both engines of the same plane, and the chain of failures that followed. The report called for changes to quality checks that were adopted by every major aircraft maker within 2 years. Pages 201 through 400 covered the flight, the crew's emergency steps, the calls to Houston Center, the choice to try a ground landing instead of a water landing, and the approach and impact. The report found that Captain Hayes and First Officer Torres had performed far beyond any reasonable expectation, given the conditions, and noted that their 86% survival rate for a double-engine explosion at cruising height goes well beyond any matching event in aviation history. Pages 401 through 600 covered why people survived, the choice of landing ground, how the plane was set up for impact, the exit from the plane, and the emergency response. This section noted the help given by a passenger with specialized flying experience. The Department of Defense had managed to keep Nadia's exact identity out of the official report, even though her name was in every newspaper in the country, who had provided tactical guidance to the cockpit crew that directly helped people survive. The report ended with these words: the survival of Continental Airlines Flight 1847 was the result of many things working together, how the plane broke, how the crew performed, how the emergency teams responded after the crash, and one thing that cannot be trained for or planned ahead of time, the presence on the aircraft of a person whose specific background and skills turned out to be exactly what the emergency needed. What the report could not fully say, what 847 pages and photographs and flight data and witness accounts could not completely hold, was what had happened between a woman in cargo pants and a captain who had just told his passengers he did not think they would survive. What had happened was this: someone who had spent 23 years learning to find the way home from places that seemed to have no way home had looked at one more such place and said, "I have seen worse. I know the way. Follow me." And 186 people had followed her home. That was the story. All of it. That was Commander.